He seemed like an ordinary man. He blended into the background, but behind his unremarkable facade hid a monster. Samuel Little, America's most prolific serial killer, confessed to 93 murders. For decades he moved through the shadows. He preyed on the vulnerable. His victims, mostly women, were often overlooked by society. Their disappearances rarely made headlines. Little's reign of terror stretched across the country. He left a trail of bodies from coast to coast. His crimes remained hidden in plain sight for years. How did he escape justice for so long?
Samuel Little's criminal history began long before his murder spree. Born in 1940, Little's early life was marked by instability and violence. He was first arrested in 1956 for breaking and entering, setting the stage for a lifetime of criminal behavior. He had a history of violence against women. His relationships were often abusive, leaving a trail of traumatized victims in his wake. Little's violent tendencies were evident to those who knew him, but the full extent of his brutality was yet to be revealed. Petty theft, assault, and rape dotted his rap sheet. Over the decades, he was arrested nearly 100 times across multiple states, but he often managed to evade long-term imprisonment. His ability to slip through the cracks of the justice system allowed him to continue his predatory behavior. These early offenses foreshadowed the darkness that would consume him. Little's crimes escalated in severity, and by the 1970s he had begun his killing spree, targeting vulnerable women, often those marginalized by society. In 2012, Little was finally apprehended. His arrest came after years of evading justice, living a transient lifestyle that made it difficult for law enforcement to track him. He was extradited to California on a drug charge. This seemingly minor offense would become the key to unlocking his dark past. Little's arrest on drug charges provided the opportunity for investigators to delve deeper into his history. It was during this time that his web of lies began to unravel. Investigators took a closer look at his past, uncovering inconsistencies and suspicious patterns that pointed to more serious crimes. A routine DNA test linked him to 3 unsolved murders in Los Angeles. This breakthrough was the result of advancements in forensic technology, which allowed cold cases to be re-examined with fresh eyes. The Los Angeles Police Department suspected there was more to Little's story. They began to piece together a timeline of his movements, connecting him to numerous unsolved cases across the country. They brought in Texas Ranger James Holland, renowned for his expertise in interviewing serial killers. Holland's skillful interrogation techniques would prove crucial in getting Little to confess to his heinous crimes, ultimately revealing the true extent of his murderous rampage.
Samuel Little targeted women on the margins of society. These women were often overlooked and forgotten by the mainstream, making them easy prey for someone with malicious intent. Many were involved in sex work or struggled with addiction. Their daily lives were fraught with danger and uncertainty, making them more susceptible to manipulation and exploitation. Their lives were often marked by poverty and instability. Living in impoverished neighborhoods, they faced constant challenges just to survive, with limited access to resources and support systems. This made them easy targets for Little's depravity. Isolated and vulnerable, they were often found in dark alleys or distressed in urban settings where they were less likely to receive help. He used his charm to gain their trust. Little was adept at presenting himself as a friendly and trustworthy individual, making it easier for him to approach and engage with his victims. He lured them with promises of drugs or money. By offering what they desperately needed, he manipulated their vulnerabilities to his advantage, creating a false sense of security. Then, he would unleash his violence upon them. Once he had them in his grasp, the facade of kindness would drop, revealing his true, violent nature. His victims died brutal, senseless deaths. The aftermath of his attacks left a trail of devastation, with detectives and police working tirelessly to piece together the horrific scenes. The transient nature of their lives made it difficult to track them. Constantly on the move, these individuals often lacked stable housing, making it challenging for authorities to keep tabs on their whereabouts. Their disappearances often went unreported. In many cases, their absences were unnoticed, and missing person reports were either delayed or never filed, further complicating investigations. This allowed Little to operate with impunity for decades. The lack of immediate attention and the overwhelming number of cold cases meant that Little could continue his spree without significant interference. He moved from state to state, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. His nomadic lifestyle enabled him to evade capture as he crossed state lines, leaving a grim legacy of unsolved murders across the country.
What drove Samuel Little to commit such horrific acts? Experts believe his troubled childhood played a role. He was abandoned by his mother at a young age. He spent his formative years in and out of foster care. Little's crimes were fueled by power and control. He derived pleasure from the suffering of his victims. His killings were not simply acts of violence, but expressions of his deep-seated misogyny.
In 2014, Samuel Little was convicted of 3 murders in California. These convictions were the result of years of painstaking investigation and tireless efforts by law enforcement. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This sentence ensured that he would never walk free again, bringing a sense of relief to the families of his victims. This was a small victory for justice, but it was only the beginning. The conviction marked the start of a deeper investigation into Little's past, revealing a much darker and more extensive history of crime.
From his prison cell, Little began to confess. His confessions were not just about the 3 murders he was convicted for, but about many more. He detailed his crimes in chilling detail, providing investigators with information only the killer could know. His confessions were meticulously recorded, each one adding to the growing list of his victims. He claimed to have killed 93 women across 19 states. This staggering number made him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history.
The FBI has since corroborated many of Little's confessions. They have worked tirelessly to match his detailed descriptions to unsolved cases, bringing closure to many families. They have matched his descriptions to unsolved cases across the country. Each match not only confirmed Little's confessions, but also helped to solve cold cases that had haunted communities for decades. The work continues as investigators strive to bring justice to all of Little's victims.
Section 6. Giving voice to the silenced, the power of confession. Samuel Little's confessions, while disturbing, have brought a sense of closure to some families. They finally know what happened to their loved ones. The authorities have been able to bring closure to cold cases that have haunted them for years. Little's willingness to confess raises a moral dilemma. Some argue that he is only seeking notoriety, others believe he is genuinely remorseful. Regardless of his motives, his confessions have shed light on the epidemic of violence against marginalized women.
Section 7. Unanswered Questions, the ongoing investigation. Despite Samuel Little's confessions, many questions remain. The investigation into his crimes is ongoing. Authorities are still working to identify all of his victims. They are piecing together his movements across the country. The case of Samuel Little highlights the systemic failures that allowed him to evade justice for so long. It underscores the need for better communication between law enforcement agencies. It also exposes the vulnerability of marginalized communities. Section 8. Beyond Belief. Confronting the depths of human cruelty. The case of Samuel Little is a stark reminder of the capacity for evil that exists within humanity. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our society. We must ask ourselves, how could this happen? What can we do to prevent it from happening again? Little's crime should serve as a wake-up call. We must do more to protect the vulnerable. We must address the root causes of violence against women. We must never forget the victims. Section 9. Join the conversation, seeking justice for Samuel Little's victims. The case of Samuel Little is a chilling reminder that monsters often hide in plain sight. It's a story about the victims, their families, and the tireless pursuit of justice. What are your thoughts on the Samuel Little case? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to Beyond Belief TV for more true crime content. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.